All right, so here we are. We are having a special event on the live stream today. We have a special guest from the Mount Sinai RSI Support Group, Laura Miner. She's been kind enough to allow this invitation from that group for me to speak to be broadcast to all of you who possibly won't be able to make it. So I am going to introduce Laura right now. Welcome, Laura Miner. She's been a leading light for so many years in this field. We've known each other for many, many years. So go ahead, Laura.
I would say uh, going on 30 years, I'm an injured worker with RSI since the early 90s, and I'm, as it were, the corresponding secretary for the RSI Support Group of the Selikoff Clinic at Mount Sinai Medical Center. And I'm really pleased that we can do this. Um, I would say that it's through Deborah Quilter that I found the group. I found her first book when it first came out. I was in a bookstore, and a friend was looking on the shelves and pulled it down and said, "This might interest you." And I say it's because of Deborah that my hands are not really paralyzed and all, because she gave such great advice on not only illustrating, she's the best illustrator of how the injury happens, what the anatomy and the workload, and what to do about it. And over the years, she's branched out into um, teaching us about yoga, Feldenkrais, wellness, exercise, and um, how to adapt altogether. Extremely valuable. And she's made contacts all over the world and has an international following, which brings us into contact with an even wider number of people who are helpful. So, and this will be recorded and can be replayed afterwards at your convenience. Great.
That's right. Thank you, Laura, for that nice introduction. And
Yeah.
it's such a pleasure to see you,
Yeah.
not in person, but here we are.
Yeah.
So, if anybody's interested in joining Laura's group, I will put a link in the description below, so there'll be contact information. And it's really great to have people in the community who understand what you're going through. And, you know, it's a lot to keep something like that going. So I really want to salute you, Laura, for hanging in there and for caring so much about other people with RSI that you would, take the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. But and also, it's not just the support group, but also the clinic, the
Hmm.
doctors at the clinic who treat people with, who diagnose and treat and help
Hmm.
them through the process of workers' compensation and other types of support. So that's
Yeah, that's a big one too.
yeah.
All right, so are we ready to start? Okay, then I'm going to make a few adjustments here. Before we begin, I want to encourage everybody um, to create a safe space with me. And in order to do that, we want to be really polite. So that means no spamming, no um, links, no criticizing anybody or offering unsolicited advice to anybody. And that way, everybody will feel safe because, we want to create a welcoming environment. The other thing I wanted to say is that now that just flew out of my head. Um, if you want to keep yourself private, don't put your real name in the comments. Use your initials or your first name only or something where people can't identify you, because some people are nervous. Some people are worried about losing their job and they don't want it all over the world that they've got RSI, and this is a real concern. So if you want to make a comment, do so under another name, and we'll get to as many as we can. So, the topic for today is how my thinking has changed about RSI since I first wrote my first book, and it was published in 1994. And it's really, it's been a journey. I found that my thinking has really been transformed by a number of things that have happened over the years, because I never stopped studying or looking for answers or looking for people who actually knew something about RSI. And I wrote that first book because I wanted to help people prevent repetitive strain injury. I didn't want anyone to go through what I was going through myself or what I was seeing other people go through. And while many people have found that book to be helpful, I really seriously doubt that it has prevented a single case of repetitive strain injury. And that's because people are interested in prevention when they have a serious disability. And it's really, something that you're going to have to manage and live with and be on that roller coaster and tightrope for the rest of your life, basically. So if people weren't injured and I would volunteer some advice, they would say, "Well, my hands are fine. I don't have a problem." And then I would try to explain, "Well, this is an overuse injury and you can get it X, Y, and Z ways." And they didn't seem to understand that concept either until they got injured. And then they would tell me they had wished they had listened to me because then they knew how serious RSI is. And the other thing that tended to happen was a lot of people would think they were cured because they would feel better after a round of physical therapy or rest. The RSI is episodic in the beginning. You'll have one episode and it goes away and you think you're fine. And then a few weeks or a few months later, you have another episode and that goes away. And then it keeps happening and you have other episodes. And then after a while, it stops stopping. Those episodes stop going away and things can get considerably worse as you continue to try to work and do your job, which is how I think most people get injured. So I thought I was doing okay in the beginning because um, I was doing everything the doctor said. My posture was good, my technique was good, I was taking breaks, and I I was getting worse even when I was doing all the right things. What I didn't realize and what no one told me is that RSI can get worse when you're doing all the right things. And if I had it to do over again, I would have stopped using a computer. At that juncture, the voice technology was really bad, and a lot of people were getting very bad vocal injuries, which is still a possibility, but it's much better now. So as I went from one diagnosis, I had one thing, to over 2 dozen, I realized over time that RSI gets worse because you're continuing the activity that you did, repetitive things, and that could just be household chores, things that you need to do just in daily life. And over the years, I have observed that these re-injuries can be worse than the original injury because the tissues just simply aren't as strong or as resilient as they were when you weren't injured. You don't heal as well, and you're more likely to relapse if you aren't careful. And even when you are careful, sometimes you just have a day where you had to do too much. So most people learn this through experience. So the co-author of my first book made a really important connection about poor typing technique and various injuries that can happen. Epicondylitis, your elbow or your wrist, your forearms. And that book, the first book, really emphasized the importance of good typing technique. So when I was doing consulting, I would teach people these very helpful techniques and they would feel the benefits for themselves because the typing would be less painful. And then if they go back to their old ways, the pain would return. So good technique was very helpful for me in the beginning. I thought it would keep me out of trouble and prevent relapses, but over the years, I realized that improving your typing technique is only part of the solution and it didn't prevent more injury because you're still using your injured hands for everything you did in your daily life, such as driving, cooking, opening doors, opening jars, and a million other activities of daily living. Furthermore, I was watching the people I knew who had been through technique retraining and round after round of re-injury, physical therapy, return to work, re-injury, physical therapy, return to work, only to quit because they couldn't keep up. They were doing all the right things, but they kept getting worse. I was worried about them. It didn't make sense to me based on what I had offered in my first book. So I wrote another book the Repetitive Strain Injury Recovery book. And that outlined my concerns about the nature of RSI getting worse even despite all your great efforts. And that book was published 4 years later. There's a chapter in that book entitled Your Job or Your Hands. And I encourage people to put their hands first. You can always get another job or figure out another way to work for yourself, but you can't get normal hand use back if you are in the latter stages of injury. Your job is to get as much normal function as you can and then to prevent re injury once you're there. It's a tightrope. It's very tricky. People usually enter the injury, re injury, rehab, re injury cycle many times before they figure out their own formula. And mine is the hand bank. And there's a video on my channel. And basically, it's about how do you pace yourself during the day? How much hand juice, how much hand energy do you have on any given day? And how are you going to allot that energy? So it's a good formula. So over the years, as an ergonomic consultant, I did all kinds of things that I thought would help my clients prevent repetitive strain injury. I taught them the importance of good posture and technique. When people discovered how posture and technique and targeted exercise could improve their symptoms, they usually embraced it enthusiastically. But it only went so far. And the only people who could really benefit were those who could work for themselves and pace themselves at a safe rate and stop working at the computer when they'd had enough. That's pretty rare in the corporate world. It's very difficult to find a boss who's going to say, stop, you say, I'm done for the afternoon at 2 o'clock. And while ergonomics is somewhat helpful in preventing RSI, it too can only go so far. I remember doing one corporate job where the client had basically taken over three people's jobs and was working at home on the weekends trying to keep up with her workload. And there is no way in the world that an ergonomic solution can compensate for the sheer amount of time she was spending at the computer. The best workstation in the world would not help with that. She was just doing too much. We are not meant to be sitting for 8 hours using our hands in repetitive ways. It's just not the way the human body is designed to work. So, as the years passed, I kept deepening my understanding about RSI. And I knew a doctor in San Francisco who I'd met in New York when he was presenting. And I spent as much time as I could with Dr. Robert Markison. And he's a hand surgeon who has a profound understanding of the upper extremity. And, I'd go see him. And one day he brought in a video he had done of a cadaver study showing why the position of typing in and of itself was so damaging. And what he would do with the cadaver was he'd take the hand and put it in the position of, playing a violin or typing or something, and look at what would happen to the nerves and tendons and soft tissue in that position. So he put the arm in the position of typing with the elbow bent and the palm down. And when he did that, he said, "Now do you understand why typing is so dangerous?" And I could see how the ulnar nerve was twisted around the elbow and all the tendons were being twisted because the normal position of the hand is in walking. Your palms are facing and your arms are swinging and everything's nice and long and nothing's being strained. And it's not to say that you can't bend your elbow and put your palms down. It's just that it's not a good idea to be doing this for hours and hours and hours on end. And there's many other examples of why this isn't a good idea. It violates the Blix curve, and that's the ideal range of motion where the muscles and tendons and nerves are neutral and they're working at their peak efficiency and least strain. So we don't want to violate the Blix curve. That's BLIX for anybody who's interested, and there's something on my channel about it. It was glaringly apparent that just bending the elbows and putting the palms down in the position of typing was a very stressful position to hold for a long time, as people are using a mouse and keyboard do for hours on end. Not only that, we live in a deconditioned society. That means people are out of shape, and you really need to be fit to be healthy. And so sitting in and of itself is just a really bad idea, for long periods. Your your blood isn't circulating, and we need all these things for health. They seem like small things, but believe me, they're not small. They're really, really important. Breathing is important, movement is important, and all of these things need to be taken into account when we're using technology. So, most of our jobs are requiring people to sit in front of computers all day. Not everybody. I mean, there's other things that can be injurious too, working on an assembly line or just doing repetitive movements all day or overhead movements like painters do, carpentry. There's many ways that repetitive hand movements can lead to injury. So it's not just the computer, but the very act of sitting at a computer is inherently dangerous. So no wonder people keep getting injured. So voice technology wasn't so great, but even as it got better and I began recommending that people dictate rather than type, it's not always possible in an open office environment. And sometimes the technologies don't match up. But if you can, it's a really good idea. I mean, even dictating into your phone, dictating a note into your phone and then sending it in an email for a light edit can be helpful. So I started recommending voice as much as possible. And yes, that comes with risks as well. You only have two vocal folds, so you need good vocal habits. Good posture is important when you're speaking. So, as I kept searching for new information about RSI, I would look online and see the same old advice that people have been giving for decades. Take breaks, sit up straight, put your equipment in proper alignment. So, how does this compensate for the sheer number of hours that we are making repetitive movements with our fingers and holding our arms outstretched? We need to look at the whole picture and all of the risk factors. How do you dictate the importance of good posture to people who have no idea that they could permanently use normal use of their hands using keyboards, mice, texting, and gaming consoles? They have no idea that this could happen. You can't force people to sit up straight. You can't force people to care about their health or do the right thing. And, even when they try to do the right thing, let's say they try to take frequent breaks, that could be an issue. They can get very self-conscious. If someone stands up in a big open office, everyone's looking like, what are you doing? It's very difficult to overcome that kind of peer pressure. And I actually knew one woman who told me she would play video games at her computer in order to give her mind a break. But that was just compounding her risk of RSI. And then I was very dismayed to see the sorts of treatments for repetitive strain injury. Website after website. And these are, big hospitals and people who I think should really have a more expansive view of this. They keep recommending splints, nonsteroidal anti inflammatory drugs, cortisone injections, and rest. The first three of those can make matters significantly worse and don't take into account overuse, awkward positioning, and many of the other risk factors of repetitive strain injury. And rest is helpful, but most people who get injured have jobs that require them to make repetitive movements for many hours a day. So, not only that, they have to use their hands for driving. Maybe they've got to drive their kids to work, cooking, household chores, childcare, all those activities of daily living, shampooing your hair. It's not like you can use your other pair of hands or have someone else help you with all of those things. So these are the same hands that are injured, so rest only goes so far. And when people finally do get back to work, sometimes it only takes 10 minutes for them to be back in the same pain or the other symptoms they had when they left for the time off. And I'd like to just say here that RSI, while it's painful for a lot of people, it's not always painful. You could have clumsiness, you could have weakness. It's not always a pain situation, but it's still repetitive strain injury. So for those of you who are listening and don't hear your symptoms, it can be many things. And maybe when we get to the Q&A, I'll post some of those symptoms up. Anyway, the misinformation on the internet also makes situation worse because if you look on YouTube, you will find lots of videos entitled something like How I Fixed My RSI or Why Overuse is Not the Reason Why People Get Injured. And these people may be well intentioned, but I don't think they're qualified to be giving advice because some of this stuff is really simplistic and they often offer stretches or exercises that are actually dangerous that will make your RSI worse. And people are so eager to get better, sometimes they'll push through pain hoping that it will make things better. And this isn't a good idea. You need to be doing very careful kinds of exercises. And stretching is a way of basically abusing the hands. So we don't uh, we don't like stretching. There's also a lot of products that are being sold, little squeezy balls and stretchy bands and things like that that can also be a bad idea for people with repetitive strain injury. So if you've been sitting for a while, we've been on for about 20 minutes. So would you please get up and march in place while you're listening to the rest of this because it's not a good idea to be sitting for a long time. I'm going to be sitting, but I have to sit. So you move, roll your shoulders, but march in place. That's a good thing to do because it gets the blood pumping. Um, so anyway, I have tried everything I can think of to help prevent repetitive strain injury. Back in the 90s, I wrote to two different American pediatric societies, warning them that children who are using, well, now there's Alexandria. Thank you. She's moving now. God bless her. Speakeasy Solution. Thank you for moving. I appreciate that. Okay. So, anyway, I wrote to two prominent pediatric societies warning them that children who are using computers are at risk for repetitive strain injury. Those organizations never replied to me. And now, exactly as I had feared, the young people who were toddlers at the time when I wrote those letters are now coming to me as patients who are so severely injured. And they all do the same thing. They lift up a coffee mug and they say, I can lift it for a minute and then I've got to put it right down. And they are more severely injured than the patients that we were seeing at the Miller Institute when I was writing my first book. Most of those people were in their 40s or 50s, and they had started on typewriters. They didn't start on computers. And these kids have started on computers, some of them at the same time they could walk, which is really, it's horrifying to me. So unless these people are very creative about forging their own career paths, they're basically rendered unemployable because they can't use their hands normally. It is very difficult to find a job that doesn't require normal hand use. The most common question I get is, Dear Ms. Quilter, what job can I do now that I can't use my hands? You have to be very creative. I'm not saying you can't work, and I believe in work. I think it's good for the soul. It's good to be a productive member of society. I really encourage you to find a way. It's just that it's really hard when you don't have normal hand use. And it can be terrifying and frustrating and heart-wrenching all at the same time. But even if someone had warned them, it's human nature to think that it can't happen to you. And very few people can comprehend the far reaching nature of RSI until they get it. They assume there's some sort of medical treatment that will get them back to normal. And until they experience RSI, they don't understand how the simplest thing could be either painful or difficult for them. This too is human nature. People take their hands and arms for granted until they lose the normal use of them. The easy way to learn this is to cut your finger or break your wrist or have a shoulder injury that prevents you from reaching. That's the easy way, and those things will get better and heal. Then you begin to understand how integral the hands are in everything that you do. But with RSI, unless you're in the very beginning stages of injury where the symptoms are so subtle that you would have no idea, and not only would you not have any idea about what they are, your doctor probably doesn't know what they are. That's the point where things could be turned around. That's the point at which you'd have to be very lucky to find someone who could really take you seriously, give you some time off, give you some treatment, and help you. I mean, I'm just thinking of what it would be like to go to your boss and saying, my hands feel kind of weird. I'm having these weird symptoms that I don't understand. And it's not bad every day, but it's bad a lot. I just don't get it. And I feel weak. And I've switched holding the subway pole. Now I do the other hand. I think even if you talk to a doctor, they might sort of laugh you out of their office. But these are the moments where you really need to pay attention. And most people have never heard of the symptoms of RSI, they don't know. So, unless you get in that very beginning stage of injury, things don't go back to normal. And, with all the computer use, I just think it's kind of like you're going back to more computer use. We need to really change the paradigm. So, in addition to physical ailments, there are many psychological consequences of RSI. People sometimes are assumed to be malingering. I have not found that to be true. People want to work. It's the most common question I get, aside from what doctor I should see, is what job can I do? They really, really, really want to work. And I applaud that. And some of them find a way. It's not like you can't find a way. I really believe if you put your mind to it, you can do it. But the other things that can happen are, friends and relatives might feel like you're not trying hard enough, or why didn't you try to get surgery when there's no surgery for what you have? Or, you know, why aren't you trying this? But you can't just snap your fingers and have your hands come back. And a lot of times you can't even snap your fingers because of the RSI. So they may not understand that you're having a good day one day and a bad day another day. So why can't you do it now? You could do it yesterday. I mean, it's hard to explain to people who don't have RSI what you're going through, which is why it's nice to have a group because they will understand. And this is one of the things that can be very difficult. They offer unsolicited advice. They know nothing about RSI. They don't know that you've probably tried everything in the world already, but it can be very irritating to get advice, when you have RSI, to be on the receiving end of that. And the treatments really haven't changed that much. When you go online and you look for the treatments for RSI, what you find are websites that recommend splints, cortisone injections, and rest. And these seem to imply that if you do that, RSI is going to go away. And it doesn't necessarily go away, especially in the latter stages. And in serious cases of RSI, these options have very limited value. Some people use splints to work, and that can be really a dangerous idea. I mean, the splinting needs to be done judiciously and under medical supervision, mainly at night if you have carpal tunnel syndrome and need to keep your wrists straight. But it's not a good idea because it can lead to muscle atrophy and lack of fluid return and all kinds of things that you don't want. So um, it can make matters worse. Some of these options, I know people who've been very unhappy with cortisone injections, and rest is great, but then you've got to go back to work, and then what's your workstation like, and how have you changed your technique, and you know, the symptoms can come back so quickly. So, physical therapy is also recommended, and depending on the treatment and the knowledge and skill of the PT, it can be very helpful. But it is not necessarily a cure. And it doesn't help very much if people are just going back to the same ergonomic situation or workplace that they left. So, you need intelligent ergonomics, good posture, pacing, a targeted exercise program that you do faithfully in addition to physical therapy. There's a lot of components that go along, and none of these things can compensate for the sheer amount of overuse that most people are expected to do for their jobs. So, this brings me to 2023 and my current thinking. I had a conversation with my seating guru, Dr. Turner Osler. And Dr. Osler has confirmed many of my suspicions about ergonomic chairs and my idea of what constitutes good posture. And I was thinking, thank you for someone who finally validates these instincts that I've had. Way back when I was wondering how technique retraining would help if someone had tears running down their cheeks when they're doing the technique retraining. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me. And the seating, it was the same situation. Why are we supporting everything in sight? So he he and I would have these conversations, and at one point I must have been complaining about prevention and how hard it is. And he said to me, he repeated a story that his mentor had told him when he was in medical school. And she said, "You can't stop people from driving drunk. We need airbags." And I thought to myself, that's it. We can't expect people to know what to do. They don't know good technique. They don't know a good device from an injurious device. They have no idea about any of this. We have to go to the root and change it. So the same thing needs to happen with repetitive strain injury. We need safer tools and working conditions. And it became glaringly apparent to me that that needs to be legislated. I look at all the public awareness campaigns we have for Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, cancers. I mean, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It's all over the place. And I think, why is there nothing about repetitive strain injury? And I look at all the curb cuts and ramps that resulted from wheelchair users who organized themselves and demanded accessibility. Nowadays, people in wheelchairs can board buses and taxis. They can go to landmark buildings because there's a ramp that allows them to enter. There are curb cuts. There's all kinds of accessibilities. When you go to the bank, there's a lower station for the people in the wheelchairs. We need the same thing for RSI. So, after hoping for many years that someone would organize people with RSI to demand safer tools and working conditions, I wrote a repetitive strain injury bill of rights and I posted it on change.org. So far, people from 13 different countries have signed on, all the way from Australia to New Zealand and Morocco and Spain, and I think it needs to be every country. Someone needs to be the ambassador for this in their own country. And it's not surprising to me that people signed on from all over the place because RSI is a global problem. It's not just here in the US, it's not just in Canada. So I'm still doing everything I can to get the word out about repetitive strain injury. I founded a YouTube channel, and you can find it if you search @Deborah Quilter. There's a there's a playlist dedicated to educating doctors on my channel. So if your doctor doesn't understand RSI, you can send them there to learn if they're willing to learn. Not every doctor wants to know. But recently I had two doctor's visits, and they ask you, they make small talk. Well, what do you do? And I tell them I wrote a couple of books on repetitive strain injury, and both of them got suddenly sitting up really straight. And they said, "Oh, I had this cervical radiculopathy for a while, and it went away." And I said, "Yeah, watch out because it can come back." And there's a playlist on my channel specifically devoted to doctors by the leading expert in this field. So if you want to learn about repetitive strain injury and how to diagnose this and how to treat it, um, go to Dr. Markuson's playlist on repetitive strain injury on YouTube. So I did that because Dr. Markuson gives a very elegant anatomy lesson. He goes through all the different types of RSI, and it's really helpful. And you can do the same thing. You can send your doctor, if you feel like your doctor doesn't understand, you can say, well, there's this website with the playlist that has the good thinking on it. So you can try and see if they're willing. And if they're not willing, I mean, unfortunately, it's a lot of doctors don't want to get involved with workers' compensation. So anyway, so I've been doing all of these things, but there really needs to be a massive public awareness and public health campaign to really address repetitive strain injury so people don't get injured in the first place. My co-author of the first book used to say prevention is the only cure, and I've found that to be true. So I've outlined what I think needs to happen in this Bill of Rights. And the first point is prevention is the only cure for RSI, and people cannot prevent an injury if they've never heard of it. So governments must institute comprehensive public awareness campaigns warning people about the risk factors and warning signs of RSI and the serious consequences of ignoring them. Public health programs have reduced the number of deaths related to smoking and have mandated curb cuts for wheelchair users. So the same effort must be applied to this disease for which the only cure is really prevention. Education is key. Number two, government agencies must revise and post proper information about ergonomics and suggested workstation designs. The guidelines must be written by doctors with expertise in repetitive strain injury and soft tissue injuries rather than people with vested interests in selling ergonomic products. Recommended computer ergonomic guidelines must be revised so they don't encourage injuries by recommending that people work in the 90-90-90 position, which is inherently dangerous. Ergonomic adjustments do not cure or necessarily prevent repetitive strain injury and must not be promoted as such. Computer users must be trained in proper posture, pacing, keying techniques, and use dictation whenever possible. Governments must fund useful, comprehensive research on the risk factors, long term effects, and effective treatments of repetitive strain injury. I would really like to see a long term study. What happens after 10 years of RSI, 20 years of RSI, 30 years of RSI? How much hand use is lost over that period of time? Every working person has the right to a proper workstation and working conditions. Manual jobs must include a variety of tasks to avoid constant repetitive work, and people must be encouraged to take frequent breaks from repetitive tasks and to stop activities that cause pain or other symptoms of RSI, even if they occur during the workday. Manufacturers must design tools and enable safer use of the hand and body. Designers must understand human anatomy, biomechanics, and the hand tool interface so that they can design for safety. Tools should be thoroughly tested for safety before they are introduced to the public. People with repetitive strain injury have the right to timely, appropriate medical care by physicians who are competent to diagnose and treat this disease. Workers' compensation must be overhauled so as not to punish the workers by delaying and or limiting the amount of treatment that they can receive or discouraging doctors from treating work-related injuries by overburdening them with unnecessary paperwork. Insurance companies must appropriately compensate doctors and other healthcare professionals who treat repetitive strain injury for the time it takes to diagnose and treat this disease. A thorough examination can take 90 minutes. Physicians must be compensated for this time. Physicians must be well trained to recognize the many varieties of repetitive strain injury and how to treat them properly, including technique evaluation and retraining, postural evaluations and retraining. They must recognize that overuse in compromised positions is a risk factor for injuries. I know so many people who tell me that their doctor said that their RSI was not related to the computer. And I have to really wonder what that doctor knows about overuse injuries. Children must be taught good posture, pacing, and technique when they are in school. They must be provided with ergonomic equipment and given plenty of breaks for whole body exercise. Gaming is particularly dangerous because it combines the possibility of addiction with overuse, poor posture, and technique, and parents and school administrators must be made aware of these issues. I think kids would be so much better off if they just didn't use computers. I mean, I don't know how to put the genie back in that bottle, but it's just so dangerous. And these young people who come to me for help are so injured, so injured. It's just awful. So I hope that you will join me, sign the petition, and share it with everyone you know and have them sign it. They don't have to be injured to sign it. One of Alexandria's friends signed it for her. And I thought that was the sweetest thing in the world. You know, you're signing it for people who have RSI, but so that other people don't get it. And the hands you save might be your own. I mean, you're probably not here if you're not injured, but that's something that you could tell to somebody who isn't injured. You know, do it for me. It's really important. And once I have a good number of signatures, I'm planning to take this. I don't know exactly where or how many organizations I'm going to take this to. The UN has a health segment, the World Health Organization, and Congress itself in this country. But whoever legislates for public health, I want to approach, and I really want this to get some traction. So I would love it if you would join this effort by, signing, keep in touch. I have this dream, this vision of getting a whole bunch of, filling up the Washington, you know, the pool, the place where they had that, where Martin Luther King sang, and all these people could be. I mean, you can't hold a picket sign because it would wear out your hands, but you could wear a sandwich board or a T-shirt and educate people. And I think we need masses of people to say, hey, this is really serious. It's so serious. And we need to do something about this. So, anyway, this has happened. I believe there's an untapped power in the RSI community that could be used for creating change. And this has happened in other areas where people thought it was impossible. People are not allowed to smoke in public places anymore. It used to be commonplace. There weren't accessibility features for people who were blind or in wheelchairs, and now there are. So this happened because people joined together. So I'm hoping that you will join me. And the last thing I want to say is I know this probably sounds pretty dark, but you can still be happy even though you've got RSI. It doesn't have to be the end of your happiness. And I was so happy because one of my students just told me that there were many things that he couldn't do anymore, but he'd never been so happy in his life. So I wanted to leave you with that and just hope that you achieve whatever dream that you're hoping to achieve. And if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to ask me. Let me see if someone else. Laura, anybody? Doesn't look like we've got any comments at the moment. So, um, so let me put Laura back up.
Do you want to repeat where people will find the petition?
Oh, thank you, Laura. It's change.org, and I actually have I have a little thing on it. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you, Dimitri Vasil. Thank you so much for keeping up the good work. I think I saw you sign the petition, and I'm very grateful for you for that. And Shona G, doing dictation is hard to do while the video is still playing. Yeah, I know. I know. And, I dictate on my phone. There's a great thing that Apple has, and my phone is always listening. So a lot of times, I'll go into the heading of something and there'll be paragraphs of things that, you know, I didn't mean to do. So, yeah, dictation is funny. It makes you think twice about what you're going to say.
I want to add that I find Siri on my iPad mini enormously helpful because I can ask it to search for specific words or phrases online and then just use one finger to tap to get it. So I've been able to do much more learning and reading and studying
Well, that's
than I ever could
wonderful.
have done otherwise. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the sign the petition. If you just go to change.org, there's I think if you search repetitive strain injury or my name, well, probably repetitive strain injury patient bill of rights, but there's the URL at the bottom there. And let's see, I've got some other things to present. Let's see now. One of the things about streaming is that you can't always see what you're doing, and that can be, okay, here we go, warning signs. So I have these on my channel as well. There's a lot of information if anybody has, questions, or if you have an idea that you want to see an episode on, you can also let me know about that. And then, so Laura had asked me if I would lead a small movement or breathing segment. So I thought it would be nice to release the neck a little bit. So if you're interested in joining me, just don't do anything that hurts, but sit right on the front edge of your chair and rest your hands on your thighs. And without trying, this is really important. Don't try. Just look and look a little bit to your right and see what you see. Like I can see one of my plants. Just take a snapshot of that. And then look to your left and see what you see. And I see a lamp. So I just turn my head. It's as casual as if you were sitting in the theater just talking to somebody. And so now follow along. We're just going to do a little bit of movement to make it easier to move our neck. So without moving your head, keep your head still and just bring your right shoulder forward and then your left shoulder forward. And as you do that, your hand will slide. So I'm keeping my head still, but I'm sliding my hands down my thigh. And if that bothers you at all, just leave your hands and just only do the shoulder. In my way of teaching, nobody does anything that hurts. I don't think pain is helpful. And then let that go. And now, still sitting with your feet on the floor, bring one knee forward and one knee back. So you're just moving your knee forward and your knee back, but keep everything else still. So the right knee is coming a little bit forward, feet on the floor, left knee. And don't go to your end point. Don't stretch. I don't believe in stretching. I think it's one of the worst things you can do because it implies violence. It means you're going as far as you can, and that doesn't help. You're just basically telling your body you're going to inflict more pain on it, and it's not really helpful. Okay. And then bring your right shoulder forward and slightly turn your head to the right, and then bring your left shoulder forward and bring your nose a little bit to the left. It's a small movement, just looking at the forward shoulder. And then, without moving your head, only look to the right and then back to center a few times. So notice if your eyes are jumpy. Your head is very still. You're not moving it. And breathe. Are you inhaling or exhaling? And then close your eyes for a second. Let them rest. And then let's go to the left. So you're going to open your eyes, look a little bit to the left. Notice maybe it's easier than looking to the right, harder. Keep breathing. And then close your eyes again. Now bring your left shoulder and left shoulder back and right knee forward. Right shoulder back, left knee forward, and go back and forth like that. Relaxing everything that's not doing something and relaxing in the movement. And then if it doesn't bother you, hug yourself and just a few times turn your whole torso, keep your head still. Head doesn't move. You're turning to the right a few times. And then come back to center and then go left. So you're just going to turn back to center, turn. It's a little thing. Pelvis is still. You're just turning your chest. Good. And now remember what it was like when you first turned your head to the right? Try it now and see. Oh, is it easier? Does your neck feel a little bit freer? Did you turn further without trying? Let's try the left. Go the other way. And breathe. So by doing less, very often your body will give you more because you're sending the signal to your body, I am not going to force you to do anything that hurts. And it basically will allow for more comfortable movement than if you're yanking and trying and straining and stressing. So we had one more comment that I'm going to put up on the screen here from Shona. Let me get it. Hey, Deborah, my RSI has gotten to a point where it hurts sometimes to use a fork. Do you think I have a chance of it getting better? Yes, Shona, I do. I do always believe there's hope for things getting better. It may not be easy. You know, we don't know. I can't see you. I don't know what your diagnosis is, but I always think you can do better. And so there's, sometimes it takes time and sometimes you don't realize it until suddenly one day you can do something that you couldn't do more easily because you've been doing your exercises, paying attention to your pacing, watching everything. So climbing back on that tightrope and staying there is the challenge for people with repetitive strain injury. You need to really be vigilant, but I think there's hope and we don't know. The other thing we don't know is how much better you can get. We don't know, you know? Um, we don't know the person that you will meet who will have the treatment that really works for you or the adaptation that you will discover that was leading to more problems or the doctor that you will find who will make a very discerning and targeted diagnosis and be able to help you that way. So I would say just hang in there. Don't give up. Keep going. It's just a process. It's a journey, and I think you can. So let's see. So I think that's all of our questions for today. I am going to put up another screen here for everybody. It's a thank you. So I'd like to thank you for attending and thank Laura Miner and Jonathan Dropkin for inviting me to speak to you today. This will be posted on my YouTube channel. So if somebody missed it and you feel like they could benefit, you can send them the link. It'll be under the live section. There's different tabs on the YouTube uh, platform, and it'll be under live. And if you want to be notified of the next live stream, we're going to be doing a great live stream with Alexandria and another one of my students. Alexandria is not my student, but a student of mine about the mistakes they wish they hadn't made. And that's coming up, so you can sign up for that. Just click the notification bell, and that there's a preview of that on live coming up. And then if you want to be on my newsletter, you can sign up. I have a website called rsihelp.com, and I put out a monthly newsletter with things of interest, letters that I get from people, anything useful that I find. So that will be there too. And the last thing I want to say is take care of your hands because you can't use your other pair of hands to do what you want to do. So going to say goodbye. Thank you, Laura. Is there anything you want to add, Laura, before we close?
Just to thank you enormously. This is fantastic. I really hope more people will get to see it.
Good. Well,
It's very true, very broad scope.
well, thank you, and thanks again for inviting me. I really appreciate the invitation, and I too hope that this really, you know, makes some waves. And I really appreciate your support, Laura. Um, every little heart that you send me counts. It's helping me grow the channel. It's helping me get the word out. It means the world to me. So thank you and Jonathan for that. So I think we will close. We're right on time. It's just under an hour. So I'm going to end this stream and see you all next time.